Yeah, look, two levels of the private sector, and to define the conversation for the audience, we're talking about obviously the businesses basically, and there is the corporate level, which accounts for a significant amount of GDP, and especially can affect the health of the economy because they account for a huge number of jobs and trade. And then there's the level of small and medium businesses. Okay, so there are a number of large corporates which probably will be affected quite severely, but there are also more secure in, let's say, their funds and their ability to weather out such a storm. There's been examples of a lot of big corporates that actually are benefiting in this situation, and when I mean benefiting, I'm not saying necessarily profiteering, although that is happening too. But it's amazing how people are very, very quick to point that out, to punish, and to publicly, let's say, scorn such efforts, and it's good in that sense. Large corporates, for example, and right now I think in general, let's talk about the effect overall in the economy. Definitely the same effect that you mentioned, where there is a huge emphasis on digitalization, is actually the same when it comes to the private sector, and quite pronounced, let's say. And you see, let's say, activity or action taken quite immediately. There's a funny anecdotal, let's say, image that I saw on Facebook hanging around. What are the primary motivators for your organization's decision to adopt digitalization, right? And you have like a little checkbox. It says, opportunities in the market, lower costs and better, I don't know, connectivity. And then there is COVID virus, and everyone has a little check on that. So it's certainly accelerating the importance of digitalization. Amazon recently just hired 100,000 people so that they can actually support the amount of online commerce. And there has been a huge move towards online. And this is on the corporate level. On the small businesses, it's even been more important. So what you've seen is a lot of small businesses which were able to create a digital offering, right? Meaning, do home delivery, do consultations online, work from home. That's been done, and it's been done very, very quickly. And I speak to a number of clients because I'm an SMB myself, a small and medium business myself, and I work with a number of SMBs, and a lot of them basically have been very, very quick to move to the online domain. Now, going forward, I think also, and one more thing I'd like to note, actually, I'd like to congratulate also a number of large businesses that have adapted their production actually to support the current efforts, right? And I think a lot of businesses, if you have the ability right now to think in what ways you can support in terms of protection masks, which are very, very, very sorely needed, in terms of alcohol-based solutions for sterilizing your hands and for protecting yourself against a virus, then I do implore you to switch up right now and support whatever efforts are required. And for a number of other businesses which the situation might feel a little bit hopeless, now really is a time for innovation, right? If if you're a classic, let's say, brick and mortars business, now's the time to start thinking about, okay, maybe you can't deliver, let's say, high-end restaurants as an example. Maybe you can't, and there is not such a huge demand to deliver food, although there's a number of high-end restaurants which are changing their offering and providing home delivery. But perhaps maybe you can, stream a meal, one of your favorite meals, to a group on Facebook and teach them how to make that recipe at home. So there's different ways to adapt, and right now it's really about adaptability. And I think that there are certain industries which, unfortunately, like Adrian Purcaru mentioned, are really severely affected. The travel industry mainly, which, I have a client in the travel, they're in the software business, but they support a company which provides in-flight entertainment in all the airliners. So as soon as China announced lockdown, this company lost 300 million, and as you can imagine, is probably bankrupt right now. So there's certain industries which severely affected. But to that I'd say the following. I mean, think about right now that top of mind on everyone that are sitting at home is, do I like my home? How is my relationship with my wife and kids, right? Is it sustainable? Do I, is it bearable? Is it productive is it actually loving right now? That's even if you're in industries right now which seem like there's not an immediate demand for it, don't forget that once this blows over, there's going to be a huge interest in travel, right? Apparently, I know right now that there's a lot of investment going on in airlines and travel industries. When there is a crisis, of course, shares go down. It becomes a lot cheaper to procure basically certain companies and shares and interest in companies. So there's a lot of interest in travel because they know that as soon as this thing blows over, what's the first thing that people are going to want to do, right? And the same basically when it comes to real estate, interior design. There's a lot of basically focus and emphasis about your location in your home. So that's what I'd say in terms of adaptability for private commerce in the private sector. And then there's also the issue about what can we do going forward so that these events, which are very very likely to happen in the future, are not going to be as severely affecting to our society. And I think a lot of people are kind of waking up, especially if you are an employee right now, and that idea of security basically has kind of gone out the window, although there are and have been a number of commendable financial packages which aim to support basically employees, right? But I think there's a big question on people's mind as to what really is security. And I think that will help kind of redefine a little bit the landscape when it comes to this idea of GDP that you mentioned, Grazian, and might shift a little bit the focus on this need for absolute security provided by companies and businesses. Well, it's no longer the case. The reality is the landscape shifts a lot, and this will only highlight, and only highlights that take away the coronavirus, right? Anyways, the landscape was shifting so fast. I mean, I'm in technology, I'm in digital, so the amount of disruption, the amount of innovation happening every single day is mind-boggling. But now when you add something that can really define and shock basically the system like coronavirus, you'll see that actually people who were not really thinking about these things, were not thinking about their own level of education, self-independence, financial independence, all those kind of things, probably right now are sitting at home thinking about these kind of things. So I think this creates an interesting mix for the future. And Grazian, you've been on my show on Architects of the Future, and I've spoken to you about my views on how I believe right now we're kind of in the midst of a Renaissance 2.0. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the original Renaissance, right, in the 16th century, guys, you had a new technology, which was the printing press. It was the first time in history where you could print in mass, right? And of course, the first bestseller that was distributed all over the world was the Bible. Secondly, you had, a tragedy, which was a fire in Constantinople. Constantinople burnt down, and for the very first time in hundreds of years, ancient texts of ancient Greek philosophy was redistributed back from Constantinople into Europe, into the hands of the Venetians and Italy, and that created the Renaissance movement, right? It brought an enlightenment period because there was access to new knowledge. But don't forget that this was happening in the backdrop of medieval times. And in medieval times, you had plagues, you had wars, you had all this strife and all this controversy. And I think, we're kind of going through our own little medieval, let's say, period right now, right? Prior and up and coming to this, there was political strife and discourse. There were, global weather events that were affecting. And now, of course, we have this. And what it serves to do actually is, to kind of bring people and kind of motivate people to the fact that actually we're responsible for our own education, our own well-being, and that, the more we can focus on this, the more actually we can help influence society in a whole, which is much more productive, and bring about what you said, Grazian, kind of like a more, focus on the human index rather than just the commercial index. And the result of, the Renaissance, the original Renaissance, was a huge birth of trade, a focus again on scientific values, the introduction of the humanist movement, which was a movement based on meritocracy and not one based on the prevalent thoughts at the time, which was mainly religion. Not to say that religion is necessarily a bad thing, but everything was mainly religion centric, and that's why they were the dark times. There was no emphasis on progress, on innovation in that sense. And more than that, I think what's kind of needed right now, and let me just make a parallel, but right now, let's see, how do we parallel to that? Aside from the fact that we're in this kind of like dark times of our own, you have for the first time access to information all over the world. You have the ability to build a business cheaper than ever, and you can use ways to promote that business and your message and your values and your beliefs. The question is right now, and I'm hoping that this event could potentially motivate people to take a kind of more renaissance stance. The question is, right, what do you do with all these tools, right? And I think moments like this kind of help motivate people to start thinking about the bigger picture, to start thinking about how can we live in a society where, of course, I'm not saying throw out capitalism, but I do believe we do need a post-capitalist model, because we realize that, consumerism and blatant consumerism, doesn't really help the planet, and you could actually directly attribute, because of our connectivity, the events of some distant place in the jungle bringing in animals, because the jungles have been cleared off. Why? So they can produce more and more goods, more and more food, more and more of all these things right now, which we're all sitting in our homes, and I'll just say a funny joke, but I'm sitting here in my papouk. Okay, I got my shirt on, I haven't had a haircut, but point is that I hope that people understand that what are the important things. And for me, the important things, and what I'm hoping would be generated out of this from the public, from the private sector, is what are you promoting actually as a company, right? Obviously you should provide some utility. I'm not saying, I'm not affiliating, and I don't have any particularly strong views on whether we should be worried about our overconsumption of meat and what that does to the environment, although you might want to check up on that, because it is a serious factor. We might want to consider cutting down a little bit on meat consumption as a society. But my point is that, how do you contribute to this whole thing? Or what have you done basically in this past to contribute to this particular viewpoint? Yeah, to where we are currently, right? And what's happening around us. So I'm hoping all these factors kind of, mesh into this opportunity that we have as the private sector, which is to actually go out and create a world that we actually, is aligned with our values, aligned with our beliefs. And at the end of the day, right now, it's really about our survival as well. So I'm hoping that will be a powerful enough stimulator. There's two ways to make a change, Alex, and you know this a lot, but one is through inspiration, and the other is through tragedy. And unfortunately, I'm also one who had to go through tragedy. I had my own, problems in my own personal life, which allowed me to start looking for better answers. And I know, that kind of happened with you, and I guess also with you, Grazian. But I'm really hoping that this moment in time, we really, step up as a species, first of all, and then from the business sector, also that echoes to the fact that, this way of or this type of an economy, or focus only on GDP, as Grazian said, is not sustainable. And we could have a much better, more fruitful, more balanced life with respect to the ecosystem and all the other needs that have been highlighted right now.